Welcome, Ginny, and welcome everybody else. This is Joe Bergeron at the Association, and also with me is Brian Kent and Michelle Fullerton. Thanks for getting on the call this afternoon. As you saw in the note from Brian yesterday, we've been getting a lot of phone calls from credit unions, some of which differ, a lot of which kind of replicate the same kinds of questions surrounding all of the card issues that you're all dealing with lately, with the rash of card compromises that have been come across our desk the past few weeks, and the reissuance and all the issues that you're dealing with. And so we thought it'd just be a good idea to get those that are interested on the line together so that you could all ask your questions, hear from each other, and maybe some of you might get some new ideas. We might get some new ideas from some of you, offer you whatever suggestions or guidance that we have to offer on this end. And I also want to let you know that we're recording this teleconference to archive for a few people who said that they were unable to be on this call because of conflicts, because of the short notice. So if you don't care to be recorded, then the choices, I guess, are call us later. Don't participate in the call, or don't say anything on the call. Otherwise, we'll have a recording of this teleconference, if it comes out, hopefully available for archiving and for everybody's use sometime later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. A couple of housekeeping details, and that's that please don't, we're in a teleconference, as Brian mentioned already, so we can all hear each other, so please don't put us on hold, especially those of you that have music on hold or messaging on hold or something like that. Because we'll all hear it, which is fine. We want to hear your music on hold, but we won't be able to hear each other talking in conversation. So one housekeeping detail. And beyond that, I guess we'll get right into the purpose of the call, and that's what I already said, that we've had a rash of compromises, and so we've been working round the clock, literally, some people in this office, to deal with the hot carding and card orders and all the related actions that have been coming through this office of late, trying to keep things up to snuff here on this end in our service to you. In kind of a perfect storm, so to speak, or not so perfect, we've had a couple staffing changes go on here in the past couple weeks as well. And some of you may noticed that Monica is no longer with us, if you ever dealt with her. And Monica had chosen some time ago, she gave us lots of lead time, that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and do that for a while. And so we don't know what the future holds. We had left it open. She may come back in to assist from time to time on a very part-time basis, maybe something more regular.
The following participant has entered the conference.
Peter, Green Mountain Credit Union 3.
But we'll find out about Monica's future involvement with us in the future. But at any rate, she won't be a full-time employee any longer. And then subsequent to that, Jen Pearson is no longer with us either. That's a more recent development. And what we have picked up for new employees is the voice of Debbie Quintana, that some of you may hear on the phone as you start to call in. She comes to us from many years at New England Federal Credit Union, a real experienced employee there and in the areas that she's working in for us now. So she's helping out tremendously. Her first official day was just yesterday, so she's brand new to us. And we also have a temp employee while we conduct a search for a permanent employee. And that temp voice that you're going to hear on the line is Christina Bergfalk. And you can call her Christina, but her name that she actually goes by is Thandi, Thandi. And I got the story about where that name comes from, but I don't really recall it. So we're trying to remember to call her Thandi here, but her first name is Christina. So we want to welcome Christina and Debbie to our group here, and they're both helping out tremendously here. Thandi is with us Christina is with us for an undetermined period of time, working pretty much full days. And so it'll be into the future for as long as needed. And then we're also conducting an employee search for a permanent person in that position, which you'll see advertised in Newslands Express this Friday. So if you know anybody that you think meets the criteria that's in the ad, send them along. And there'll probably be some overlap between whoever that new person is and Tondi. We've also been advertising outside of credit union land for about a month now, and gotten some very good applicants. So because we've got these two people on board now, we're kind of taking our time with our selection process to make sure we get exactly the right person. With that, I know things have been probably as hectic in your
The
office.
following participant has entered the conference.
Marianne Miller, Green Mountain Credit Union, Barry, Vermont, 1.
So we know things have probably been as hectic in your office with all of the card reissues that we've been dealing with as it has been here. And Brian and Michelle are here to give you a little bit of an update. Brian on some new developments and whatnot and things going forward, and Michelle on some of the phone calls that we've been getting, and some tips and tricks and whatnot for how to avoid or deal with some issues. So enough for me. I don't know which one of you is starting, but just jump right in.
Hi everybody, this is Michelle. I thank you for your time. We're all really, really busy, and I really appreciate your patience over the last couple weeks in the midst of the compromise. I just want to go over just a couple things in regards to the compromise cases that we've been sending out. Amongst the normal ones that you get on a daily basis that might have one card here, one card there, those continue to come in as normal. But as you know, there's been quite a bit of others that have come through. So to start off, we got the notification back on August 19th for Shaw's, and that first compromise consisted of about 1,800 cards among all our credit unions. And I believe mostly everybody had a significant amount that they could deal with as any compromise case this big. There was one credit union that chose to do automatic reissues because they did have over 1,000 of those cards. So we dealt with all the rest, 800 cards manually, and everything's great, letters out. Every credit union did a little bit different. Some credit unions choose to hot them first and reorder. Some people reorder and hot 2 weeks later, and a couple different other directions. Later down in the road, as you know, Home Depot came out, and that was on September 15th. That list consisted of anywhere from about 2,000. We've had 16 different alerts. You may not be on every single one Home Depot alert. You may get 2, you may get 1, you may get 10. They're doing it a little bit differently. Vantiv let us know that Visa was pulling it regionally, but Home Depot was pulling it by location. So we've been getting those anywhere from September 15th through September 23rd. And so at this point, there's about 2,000 cards on that one. Now, to keep in mind, Hannaford's in 2008 was 6,000 cards. Heartland Payment Systems was 10,000 cards. So in correlation, I think TJ Maxx was 1,500 cards. So in correlation, this is small but big for our credit unions, and just trying to decide which direction we want to go by watching the fraud that may or may not have come through. However, in the midst of both of these compromises, we just got another compromise yesterday, and we're just trying to determine which one that was. And it's actually a second list. There's about another 1,600 cards that we just determined is Shaw's. It's a second list from Shaw's, so it's -2. And we thought it might be the Goodwill compromise. Goodwill has been in the news over the last couple weeks. Their processor has got compromised with 2 other institutions, and I figured, this is probably it because, hey, Home Depot and Shaw's are compromised, we'll just get under the radar. But unfortunately, that still, at this point, I don't think has come through. And so overall, they're small, but when you add them all together, it ends up being 6,000 cards. So it's as big as Hannaford's was at the time. Now, in regards to fraud, we had a conference call with Vantiv last week just to get an idea of what they're seeing for trends. And we hadn't seen much for fraud until Friday of last week. And at this point, the states that Vantiv has seen fraud in, which is the grocery stores, like we had blocked Texas. There was 5 different states that they had suggested to block, but we haven't seen anything in that area as of yet, so we've been keeping an eye on that. The 5 states that Vantiv was just saying to watch out for. Florida, as always, California, which seems to be always the two most common, but there was Virginia, Louisiana, and Illinois. And the sixth one out of that was New York, and we still haven't seen much fraud there either. We started to have fraud on the Home Depot card starting on Friday, and this past Friday, so you might have seen the notice from us that stated, by the way, we're blocking Texas, and the code that we're blocking is a 5411, which is supermarkets and grocery stores for signature-based transactions only. They can do a PIN-based transaction. But what was happening was, because of the way Home Depot was sending out their list, or the FBI, whoever's pulling the list for us, they always do the signature-based transactions first, and then they seem to come in and then do the PIN-based terminals next. Now, not per se that the pins were compromised, but those cards seem to always come in a second list, and in the second list for Shaw's could be that side as well. And so we were seeing a lot of fraud on members in Texas at grocery stores that were actually used their card at Home Depot during the same time frames as the first alert, but used the pin-based terminal rather going through the debit side rather than credit side. So we blocked Texas immediately on Friday night and Friday night, and gave a heads up to the credit union that actually got hit with that fraud. Now, the one thing that I can say, we tend to see fraud faster because we have 15 different bins. So when one bin gets hit, I end up blocking it across the board, just to make everybody safe. And we have done that right from the beginning with our program, which we really luck out in that regards, because I think like other smaller credit unions or smaller institutions may never find that type of fraud and be able to block it because of the limited bin range. So that's what I have in that area. Now, in regards to the second Shaw's compromise list, we're putting that together now. That came out yesterday, and we're just sorting it out per credit union, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. Now, keep in mind, I know most credit unions have finished their Shaw's list, first one from August. Cards have been reissued, all the cards have been blocked primarily, and now we're dealing with the 2 Home Depots and the third Shaw's, or the second Shaw's. And so I know some credit unions have jumped right on the computers and contacted their members and chose many different ways to deal with the first Home Depot list. And some, their lists were quite large. So, we waited a few days, is another list coming out, and then we got the second list for Home Depot, and then Shaw's second list came right behind it, not even a day apart. So we do have many different options for credit unions. And again, I say credit unions can choose the direction they want to go, but we just want to let you know what options we are offering, many different credit unions, what options that we have here internally. The bigger credit unions, usually anything over even 50 is a lot when you say times 3. For smaller credit unions, and I completely understand the limited staff. So some of those smaller credit unions have gone ahead, done their address updates, and said, okay, I'm going to order the cards on this particular day. Can you please hot card all my cards 2 weeks from now? So we have some credit unions who've chosen to do that. We had one credit union choose to do an automatic reissue because they did have over 1,000 cards, and there's prices around that for sure, and I certainly can get the dates and prices out to you. The one good thing is, in regards to having these, fortunately, 3 compromises right in a row, you have the ability to take either 2 of the list or 3 of the list if you haven't even touched your first Home Depot, and merge them all into one grouping per se, and do an automatic reissue. So as long as that total, if you take those 3 lists or 2 lists, is over $500 or 500 cards, it ends up being beneficial for the cost that you end up getting charged. So Vantiv charges anywhere from the card range from 0 to 1,000 cards is $2,000 for your selection. So if you pick a particular date and you say, I want these 3 compromises to be added together, Then as long as it stays in the range from 0 to 1,000, it's a $2,000 flat fee for hot carding the card, reissuing the card, and getting those cards into the system without having you to doing any manual work other than the letters, if you choose to do letters. Now, if you go over 1,000, it's, I think, 1,001 cards to 5,000 cards is $3,500. So most credit unions are under 1,000, and if you're so close to that 1,000 range, you can manually order some and drop it under 1,000. So we do have that option there if staffing is an issue. There's many different ways, and just keeping in mind those 2 lists or 3 lists have to be over 500. Unfortunately, if you have a list of 100 and your other 2 lists are only 25, it's just not beneficial for the cost. You're going to be paying $9 to $15 a card. And you could actually get those cards manually ordered, and an overnight package is cheaper for sure. So we have the other area that we have a great program that we can offer you is these lists can be exported into Excel. And the one thing that Jennifer and I didn't realize, we've never gone back into the Vantive system to retouch a list. The lists are always small, so we never go back into the system. And we just realized the other day that when we went back into the system, when you did an update, the system updated these lists, because what happens is the lists come from MasterCard, and Vantive takes those lists from MasterCard and it imports them into their system. And when they import these card lists into their system, Vantive is then correlating that card with a member. And so when they correlate it with a member, it's like having a live database. I can go back in the CAN-CAM list and I can export it with all your updates. So if you're doing mailings, if you want to do a mail merge, if you want to do labels, we can get you do all your updates, and we can get that list back out to you a second time so you can get the current list on file. So there's so many different things that are available, and I think credit unions are going out at so many different ways. We just wanted to come together and say, hey, there's so many resources here that we can help you with just to ease it up, especially now with it being over 6,000 cards for everybody. But we're here, and we've already worked with a couple credit unions already to this point, talking about the automatic reissues. We do have 2 credit unions who, of the 3 lists, will have over just under 1,000 cards, which is tremendous. It's a lot for just 2 weeks. So that's my spiel.
Maybe just briefly here, after Michelle's summary, do we have credit unions that have specific questions they either like to ask us, or potentially, since we have a group audience here, questions you'd like to pose to your peers of maybe what other credit unions have been strategizing on, of communicating to their members, so on and so forth. So anybody has a question either for us individually and or for the group that they'd like to raise at this point in time? With that not being the case,
Ryan?
oh, yep, go right ahead. Who's it? Can I
I'm
ask?
sorry.
Peter?
Probably a question that's on everyone's mind. When is the technology due to change? Is it late next year?
And I can give you a brief update with it. And I'm going to assume we're probably a couple of different things. We're probably talking about the shift to EMV chip cards.
Yes.
Yep. So just to give you an overview, the liability shift starts in October of 2015. So that would be a scenario that if you have a chip-enabled card and you bring it to a merchant, hopefully the merchant's going to have a chip-enabled reader as well. And it works a little bit differently. As opposed to a swipe, it works as a handshake. So you put the card in, it goes into a reader, it stays in there for a few seconds, and then there's a handshake to verify the transaction. So if you have a card that way and the merchant has a chip reader, chip cards are much more secure and less prone to hacking. Not guaranteed. And of course, there's no difference if it's done over the internet, but it's expected that there's going to be a reduction to fraud. If you run into a scenario where you have a chip-enabled card starting in October of 2015, and you provide it to a merchant, if the merchant does not have an enabled chip card reader, the liability shifts from you to the merchant for that. It'll be very interesting to see what's going to happen in the Vermont market, particularly with the number of small merchants, of what exactly merchants do and do not do in regard to getting themselves chip and card readers. we don't have a crystal ball, but the earlier information we've gotten is larger merchants in Vermont, Home Depot, Walmart, and those type of ones will clearly try to make that step. They'll probably do that on a nationwide type level. In regard to your mom and pop convenience stores or small businesses, we don't know in terms of that end. There's also one thing that we'd like to remind people with as well. More than likely, and we'll be coming out with this subject in earlier 2015, the chip card functionality is more defined in the credit market than it is in the debit market. In the debit, that'll be coming out again the earlier part of next year. But what we're probably going to advise people to do is to actually do a hybrid card. So it'll be a debit card, it'll still have a magnetic stripe, and it'll have a chip on it. And on that particular scenario, if you have a chip card, it gives it to the merchant, it'll default to look for a chip card transaction first, and if not, it'll go for a mag stripe transaction.
But that doesn't, in that case, I mean, you still unfortunately got compromised because these merchants aren't changing, right? I mean, you still can have these big compromises.
You can definitely still have the compromises. The only difference that'll be there will be the potential shift in liability.
Right.
So
Depending on how it works.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the big date that's out there, Peter, it's a great question, is going to be October of 2015. As we get into the early part of 2015, we'll be able to give you specific pricing. Hybrid cards are significantly more expensive in terms of that end. We're negotiating on some prices, but we're hearing some ranges in the upper $2 to $3 a piece. So what we're recommending is credit unions...
On top of current prices, yeah.
On top of current prices. So what we're recommending is credit unions sit tight for now, particularly with that liability shift still being a ways down the road, because otherwise you take the chance of issuing much more expensive cards without necessarily receiving that benefit yet. But again, we're not going to be waiting too much longer before we put that option on the table, and that'll be up to credit unions. You're not required to issue chip cards, but you can take advantage of the liability shift if you decide to do so. So that'll be a business decision that we'll be helping everyone on our group make toward the early part of next year. Does that answer your question?
It does. The other side would be the merchant services folks. Are they going to be dropping the exclusive mag strip readers and just issuing from that point on the combination?
Over time, we may see that. I would probably venture to guess that in October of 2015, you'll still have a very large number of merchants in the U.S. market, which will be just mag stripe only readers. Again, they're somewhat dependent on the merchant's willingness to make adjustments. And then
pay for the new equipment.
Yeah,
too.
pay for the new equipment. Obviously, if there's expenses, that'll try to be a decision that a small merchant will make of how much does it cost versus what they perceive to be their liability risk. And without getting too much on tangent, I can spend a little bit more time has been the bit of the unknown that's come up in the last couple of weeks, which is Apple Pay, which talks about making mobile phone payments and a special transaction basis that's getting referred to as tokenization, where details are still coming out as well. But we envision over 2015 that'll play into the market as well and probably work side by side with chip cards.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is if these merchants aren't going to listen to their customers, they're going to find some other avenue. So is EMV really going to get off here in the United States? That's the biggest question that's still up in the air, because those who currently have issued EMV, all the rules have changed, and they're going to have to reissue when the new rules come out. So even to this day, if you had issued an EMV card, yes, you can use it in foreign countries. You're still swiping here in the United States and having that card compromised. So instead of a $3 card you're issuing, you're having to reissue a $7 card. So it's a challenge for sure. And Vantiv really held back a little bit on that because they knew cards would have to be reissued. And MasterCard and Visa and the regulations, they couldn't figure out which direction they wanted to go. They were trying to force it through the Visa and MasterCard, having two network for signature base, which you can't do.
So hopefully that gives you some more information on that. Any other questions from any of the other people on the call as of this point in time?
It's a misnomer in all of the trade publications that you read in the articles. How it's misleading how much assumption there is in some articles that EMV is going to be the savior of fraud and whatnot, and that it's all going to drop like a rock in terms of the amount of fraud.
And I'm not really
just by issuing EMV
I'm not
cards.
really sure how overseas did it. I mean, were they forcing merchants to be EMV? Did they incentivize them? You know, I just don't know. I mean, yes, it's prevalent over there, but you know, will it ever kick off here? I honestly don't know.
Well, I think like a lot of things, there was less infrastructure in some other countries because, you know, they have smaller
started off
financial
new,
systems
yeah.
and whatnot, and they start out earlier in the process with, you know, more modern conveniences. And so, like, you know, there's a lot of foreign countries that have been doing mobile payments, for example, with phones for a long, long time, and it just hasn't flown here. And, you know, I think here it's because we have such a huge infrastructure of merchants and processors and card issuers and whatnot that are all focused on that mag stripe for so long, and it works and it's cheap, and you know, it's just the way it is. And so trying to get that ship of all that stuff to change course and go in a different direction is really challenging.
And I mean, it's expensive, but if they're going to have a liability shift in this regards, if you have a compromise like this, if they have to start eating these fees that credit unions are having to eat, then they're going to might think twice about.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
So even in our Vermont legislature, you know, a lot of legislators are small store owners or merchants of one sort or another. And, you know, when I talk to them, they all want the safety of, they too think they want the safety of EMV and all this kind of stuff, but they don't want to pay for it. So they want the processor to just put the machine in because it's the right thing to do. And processors aren't doing that.
I can add a few other things, and again, welcome to questions if people want to ask them to us or to the group. But just as a reminder, a very strong benefit of your program here is what we do in terms of ordering that generic plastic. It's been a challenge for us, but we have a great team here, and Michelle and her staff have been doing extraordinary work of keeping on track of all the card compromises, getting card issues on a timely basis, taking all the questions that come in, and we realize it's tiring and frustrating for your staff as well when you see large card compromises coming in within a relatively short period of time. But as a safety buffer, we have reached out to our card manufacturer and ordered several thousand more units of plastic. We always keep a large inventory on hand just in case we ever reach a scenario like that. And if we see a larger card compromises start to get that inventory a little bit lower, we'll take the necessary steps and bear the necessary expense to make sure that we'll always have adequate inventory on staff to handle these type of things for you. So we just want to give that to you for an insurance. In addition, you might have seen a recent communication that came from our office. We're working very actively with Vantiv to uncover all stones and use every step we can to cut down on fraud, not only to help you with expense-wise, but to also help you with a member experience. And we have a new service coming out toward the end of next month on the 27th, which is going to be a Deptra, where your members will get IVR calls and or text messages, simply another resource that we can use to help cut down on fraud, and that's all going to be offered to you at no additional expense. I do have one other thing I can touch base on, but again, want to leave an opportunity if people have questions either about what I just said or some other questions that you've been intending to ask to us or to people in the group.
I just want to first, before Brian goes into something else, I just want to say thank you to everybody for your patience and greatly appreciate you just working with us and understanding we're not answering your phone calls. It's not because we're ignoring the phone call. We're just on another line trying to help the next credit union, and phone calls are certainly taking longer now than expected previously. So we greatly appreciate your patience there, and please use voicemail. We'll call you right back. Unless you have a member right in front of you who's stuck somewhere, we just really appreciate just helping us out just a little bit. Again, if you have any questions, shoot us an email. If you're interested in the automatic reissue and you have enough cards that you still haven't reissued, certainly put your hand out to us and we can make that work for you and try our hardest to get you on the schedule. Vantiv did, it's usually every 2 weeks, so you'd have to let them know a month in advance if you wanted to be in the next 2-week round. But they've actually added more weeks in to play, so the time frames are a little less now. But also keep in mind, we got to get the card out to the member, and then we got to get that card hotted, which is usually 2 weeks later. If automatic reissued is not an option for your credit unions because you just don't have enough to get over that 500 minimum mark, we're here. So if you need cards ordered, as long as you do the maintenances and get those orders in, we'll get them out, and we can schedule hot blocks. We'll take your list and go right down through the hot blocks, which a lot of credit unions have taken advantage of, saying, okay, we've ordered the cards this day. They've let us know that, you know, if you can hot block those cards 2 weeks later, we'll grab that list and just go right down through that list, and we throw that right on our schedule. So again, I thank everybody for their patience and in the transition here and in the midst of the compromise.
Sure. The last thing, just to wrap up, there's certainly been a buzz in the national news about what's come out with Apple and Apple Pay. I won't profess to be an expert on it, but very briefly it talks about taking the information on your card, loading it onto your mobile device, and then if you take it to a merchant, it uses what's called NFC, or near frequency communications. So basically you hold your phone up to a reader and it authorizes the transaction. The one other twist that they have in there is Apple has built in what they call this tokenization, where it's a more secure format of how the information is transmitted from the phone to the merchant, where the merchant actually doesn't capture the card information. It could be a good thing coming up down the road, because the earlier indications it implies it's a more secure transaction, but there's still a lot of dust or something has to get settled. With that said, we've been working very actively with Vantiv. This certainly has the possibility that it could get some legs and take off very quickly, and we want to make sure that if it does, it's an option that we can have out there for credit unions. So we've had some informal conversations with more details going to be coming out from Vantiv as early as November. And it can clearly be the case if this starts gaining traction that Vantiv will have a solution that they'll propose to us, and we can keep you informed in terms of what those options are shortly after we receive it from Vantiv. At this point in time, that's expected in November. So I just wanted to pass that along, that we're aware of it. Vantiv is very actively working on it, and you can expect some more details soon that if your credit union wants to participate it, how that procedure is going to work.
Anything from anybody? Comments, questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Michelle, for the update. Again, we've attempted to record this. We'll see how good the recording comes out afterwards. Assuming that it does, we'll make it available to everyone that wants it. And as Michelle pointed out, if you have any questions or any follow-up comments or whatnot, feel free to call any of us or any of the CUcard department here, because that's what we're here for. So cross your fingers that there's no more card compromise lists that come through, that we've seen the worst of it, hopefully. And thanks for dialing in this afternoon.